The ARC coordination process was our last PDE environmental issue to discuss, except for public involvement, which really takes place throughout the whole process. So now we're going to be moving on to reevaluations, and these take place after the PDE phase. And so before I go into this, I want to let you know there's guidance on specifically SEER reevaluation in Part 1, Chapter 10 of the PDE manual. And there's also a chapter in the manual that focuses on the reevaluation process. That's Part 1, Chapter 13. And although this chapter is focused on those federal projects, it does provide an overview of the whole procedure for conducting reevaluations, and it includes guidance on preparing the form and SWEPT. So if you'd like more information, please see these resources. And also OEM is currently developing CBT trainings to support both of these chapters. So what is a reevaluation? Well, it's a review of proposed changes after the PDE phase, such as changes in action, affected environment, anticipated impact, and also applicable requirements or mitigation measures as they relate to that approved SEER. Now, this process includes documenting project changes, confirming the status of the commitments that were made, and also the status of associated permits. Why do we do reevaluation? Well, they're required for federal projects prior to advancing the project to the next phase of development, but we also do them for SEER projects as a part of our procedure. It's advantageous to complete them so that the project's ready to move on to the next phase. A reevaluation is needed to document what changes, if any, have occurred in the project. And these changes might include changes in design, project limits, or the scope of the project. And rules or regulations may also have changed since the project went through PDE. Circumstances in the project area may have changed, or other new information affecting the project may be available. The reevaluation process assists FDOT in determining if additional analysis is needed. And reevaluations are also done to update the status of those commitments, any coordination, permits, and other relevant information. And documenting these changes also helps ensure compliance with applicable federal and state regulations. When do we do a reevaluation? Well, they're completed when there are design changes resulting in new or additional impacts. So they're also completed when there are project changes due to changes in law, the passage of time, or changes in resource or issue status. For example, let's say a new species was added to the federal list of threatened or endangered species, and that species has the potential to inhabit our project area. Then consultation with the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service would be needed, and the reevaluation would need to be done to analyze, how this change is going to impact the project. A reevaluation is prepared when moving from one phase to another, if longer than a year since approval of the SEER or the last reevaluation. And often there may be an overlap of phases, such as right-of-way and design phases. And in this case, a reevaluation could cover both. And typically, Turnpike prepares design change reevaluations and construction advertisement reevaluations. And even if the project's a design build project, reevaluations are done to make it easier to move on. So for these projects, the reevaluation is prepared prior to bringing on the design build team. Project managers should be aware that major changes to the project scope can impact your project schedule, as these changes may require additional environmental analysis. And this is particularly important for design build projects where the design and the construction advance concurrently. The effects of major design changes on the project schedule should be considered before approving these changes, because these can lead to project delays if not identified and addressed appropriately. Design project managers should, whenever possible, minimize project changes that could impact previously coordinated avoidance, minimization, and mitigation of impacts or commitments that were made during the PD&E phase. Project managers should also recognize that changes may require additional interagency coordination or consultation, or also public involvement, such as needing a public hearing, as well as the identification of new impacts requiring additional evaluation, which takes time. So, for example, a project that requires an additional right-of-way will need to analyze the site for new environmental issues. If the project includes a previously unaffected historic resource, then the turnpike is now going to need to consult with the Florida Division of Historic Resources. And this consultation will take time, and this should be considered prior to making this design change. Listed here are those types of design changes that may trigger new environmental impacts. There's changes in interchange type or access, changes in typical section, shifts in the roadway alignment, of course, changes in right-of-way needs, changes due to revised design control and criteria, new design variations or exceptions, and changes in drainage or stormwater requirements. A reevaluation of a SEER is prepared by using the State Environmental Impact Report Reevaluation Form. And this form is now prepared and swept. There's guidance and a sample form that's provided in Part 1, Chapter 10 of the PD&E manual. And this shows the sample form in Figure 10.5 and how it looks when the form is filled out here and swept on the left. And guidance on how to fill out this form is also provided in a swept reevaluation form training PowerPoint and quick guide, which are available on OEM's training website. To date, the Turnpike Office has not completed a SEER reevaluation in SWEPT, but going forward, they will. So our example here is from a project that was prepared by a different district. The form includes general information in Section 1. Most of this is pre-populated in SWEPT, and it identifies the reevaluation type, which could be more than one in the case that there's overlap in project phases, such as of right-of-way and design. And it includes the approval date of the original SEER and your project numbers, name, location, and limits. Also, prior reevaluations are identified, as well as the segment of highway being evaluated. And Section 2 includes that project description. Section 3 identifies if there are any changes in federal, state laws, rules, regulations, or guidance that require consideration since the date of the SEER or the last reevaluation. Section 4 includes design changes that have occurred since the approval of that original SEER or a most recent reevaluation. And this may include changes in typical section, drainage or stormwater requirements, design control and criteria, or temporary roads or bridges. Section 5, public involvement, includes any additional public involvement activities. And for this project here, there was an additional open house held, and this documents that and also states that there was no change in the status. Section 6 updates the planning consistency information. Now, planning consistency, it won't hold up your approval, but it's advantageous to have the MPOs on board just to be sure that the project is in good standing. Now, Section 7 is used to document the evaluation of changes in impact to affected issues or resources. This list from the sample in the chapter should look familiar because these are those same issues and resources that were evaluated in the SEER. For example, there may be additional noise analysis needed or additional public input, such as a noise public workshop to discuss the desirability of noise barriers. So information on this change would be included in this form And supporting information on the analysis would be referenced and could be included as an attachment. Section 8 provides an update on the commitments and identifies new commitments since that originally approved SEER or most recent reevaluation. And any changes to commitments should have an explanation. Now, new environmental commitments can arise from a variety of sources, such as subsequent agency negotiations or from public involvement. New environmental commitments added since the last approval should be listed and added to the project commitment record, or PCR. And the Turnpike must review, verify, and update the PCR in Project Suite Enterprise Edition and attach the updated PCR to the reevaluation. As you can see, it is attached to this SEER here. Section 9 identifies permits that are required for the project, and this includes their status and any documents and modifications since the SEER approval or the last reevaluation. The conclusion is stated in Section 10, and it contains a statement documenting that the project has been reevaluated and that there have been no changes to the project that affect the original environmental determination. It also includes a recommendation that the project can be advanced to the next phase. Section 11, district review and approval, is where the Turnpike approving authority or designee approves the document with an electronic signature. Section 12, OEM approval, is not applicable because OEM does not sign the SEER reevaluations. And it is here because this form is used for both state projects and federal projects in SWEPT. In Section 13, other documents are included as links. Supporting documentation may include summaries of reports, those agency coordination letters, or documentation of stakeholder coordination, and new and public involvement or public hearing information. The approved reevaluation is maintained in the project file and is distributed to other offices as appropriate. Now, the last step is preparing the environmental certification. So after the reevaluation is signed, the Turnpike's going to prepare the status of environmental certification for state project form in SWEPT. Now, SWEPT automatically populates the top portion of this form with project information, and it will even fill out that it's going to be a SEER. The date that the original SEER was approved is entered, as well as the date of the reevaluation and the date that the reevaluation was approved. And once the form is completed, the environmental manager or designee is going to apply their SWEPT signature. A PDF of the document is automatically sent to the project file to be stored in EVMS. And the preparer is also able to save this PDF and distribute it to those that need it. And also, I just wanted to note that during the preparation of this form, there's a place to identify if it's a final certification supporting construction advertisement. Once this is selected, then SWEPT knows to make sure that it is filed accordingly. And this certification it's part of the plans prep package that's needed before the project is advertised. I know that was a quick run through, but here are some of the resources that were mentioned in this section. And I don't know if we have time, but if we do, I'd be glad to answer any questions.